Thanks everybody for joining. What we'll do today is that because we are primarily using this very crisp presentation to make a recording of this report and its presentation by Professor Amitabh Kundu. For almost all the time, we will all be muted and Professor Kundu will be presenting this report. I would just like to quickly invite all of you on behalf of the Center for Development Policy and Practice, which is, along with Oxfam, which has been the primary mover of this report. Thank Professor Amitabh Kundu for having authored this really seminal work, which is not only important, but it is also extremely contemporary. It's also necessary to point out that this report comes as a very strong and a very robust measure of what is happening with our workforce, and therefore the findings of this report are really critical given the nature of what is happening to unemployment in the country, to the dwindling workforce as far as female workforce participation is concerned, and the various socio-religious groups that get affected and got affected by what happened during COVID and the realignment of workforces and migration after that. This report is very significant because it comes at a time when we are looking at a post-COVID recovery, and this recovery will not be complete unless the new workforce and employment go back to where they were and get realigned in terms of skill availability, in terms of what happens to migratory movements, and therefore this report is of acute importance. May I also welcome Professor Abdul Shaban, who from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, who's worked on this area for quite a bit, is now physically located in Paris. And thanks, Shaban, for joining us early morning to comment on this report. The copy of this report is available in English to most of you. Let me also announce that we are now translating the same report into Urdu, Telugu, and Hindi, given the fact that it is something that worries everybody, especially the large workforce that has got affected by COVID. So as a result, we are getting it translated. We should have the translated versions ready to be released and spoken about in December. Today, we will discuss the English version of the report. We will have Professor Amitabh Kundu give us a very concise presentation on what the report contains, how the calculations were done, and what does it suggest as far as policy and movement further on the labor force is concerned. I can't thank Professor Amitabh Kundu enough for having agreed to do this, not only to have written such an important report, but also to be so readily available to present it to us, so that not only can we understand all the contours of workforce change that he has seen and estimated, but also to be able to share it with a large group of people who are extremely interested in what is happening to the workforce in India. As I said, on behalf of CDPP, on behalf of Oxfam, may I welcome all of you to this very interesting session that we are going to have with Professor Kundu and Professor Shaban. So thank you in advance, Professor Kundu. The mic and the Zoom is all yours. We have, I think, given you the rights to. Naya, will you, or Naved, will you just give Professor Kundu the rights to share his presentation? Make him a co-host. And yes, sir. And over to you now.
Thank you. Let me begin by thanking CDPP, particularly Professor Dr. Amir Ullah Khan, for organizing this panel discussion. You are all aware, probably, that Oxfam India and Oxfam International regularly brings out inequality report at their national and also at the global level. This year, Oxfam India decided to bring out for the first time India Discrimination Report 2022. Now, it was entrusted to me to organize the whole report, chapterization, and identify the authors. And we did work with an advisory committee, which included the chief of Oxfam India, that is Amitabh Kundu, also Professor Madheshwaran, Dr. Khalid, Dr. Varghese, and others. Now, often we don't make a distinction between inequality and discrimination. But in labor market, there is a significant difference between the two. Let me take an example. If the unemployment rate for the Dalits, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population included, is about 30%, and the unemployment rate for the non-scheduled caste is 20%, 10% less, that does not necessarily mean there is the entire thing is because of discrimination. Similarly, if the daily earning of the non-scheduled caste person is 400 rupees, let's say, and for a scheduled caste worker, it is 200, the entire gap of 200 is not because of discrimination. There are two factors. One is endowments and the capabilities. We have very broad categories of employment: regular employment, casual employment, and self-employment. Now, when you take the Dalit population and non-Dalit population and find that income gap on a daily basis is 200, there is a mathematical model which identifies how much of it is because of endowment or capabilities. Out of the 200, suppose the model identifies that rupees 50 differences because of the endowments, because Dalits have a lower level of education, lower level of experience, whatever capability factor we have included, which means that rupees 50 is because of discrimination out of 200, and 150 rupees gap is because of the identity of the individual as a Dalit in the labor market. So the model will give 75% discrimination and 25% gap is because of endowment. And it is extremely important to really consider the total gap and make two parts, one because of endowments, another because of the capabilities. What our study does is exactly doing this. It does it for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe versus non-scheduled caste, non-scheduled tribe population. Muslims versus non-Muslim population, and women vis-a-vis the men. That's a very, very important, component of discrimination. We used very standard model, which is globally being used to identify discrimination, but we made suitable recommendations to, accommodate the Indian reality, Indian ground situation. And what we do is to take the data, which is non-controversial. We thought, since this is the first time that discrimination report is coming out, let there be no controversy about the sample size, the bias in the questionnaire, and where you are canvassing selection of the areas. We thought we will take the national level data, all India data, from national sample survey. We wanted to see the change over time, the longer period. So our base is 2004-05 national sample survey data on employment, unemployment. And then we have periodic labor force survey data, again from NSO, National Statistical Office, which gives information by social groups, by genders, by religious categories. So the terminal year that we could take is 1819 and 1920. We could not include 2021 data because that was not available when we were doing the work, and even now all the details are not available. So what we did was to calculate discrimination in the base year and also in the terminal year using this information, and simply we have presented the results of our analysis. This is the labor market study, but there are two other components. We have also taken the factor market, factors of production, and we could restrict it only to agricultural credit in the rural areas. And that analysis of access to agricultural credit and discrimination thereof is worked out for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and non-scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population. We have not been able to include the religious dimension. Then the third thing beside labor market, factor market, is the endowment market, the capability creation. We have taken health and access to health facilities, public sector health facilities, as the representative of the endowment market. And we have found out access to public health facilities by gender, by caste, and also by income groups. So this is the overall picture of the study. Professor Amir Ullah Khan, would you like me to get into the results, or would you like to have some discussion on the methodology database? Any question that Professor Shaban, or any clarification that you may have?
No, I think we will first get the results so that it becomes one cogent piece, and then we will come in with all our questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So, first thing I'd like to say is the discrimination in the access to employment. In the labor market, we have considered two things: whether get the employment, and in securing an employment, if there is a discrimination, we calculate that. And second, after you get the employment, if there is any discrimination in the earning, again, earning of the regular workers, self-employed, and casual workers. If there is any gap in the earnings because of your social identity, because of your identity as a scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, or a Muslim, or a woman, then we calculate that. The first thing I would like to give, in a way, mixed news, mixed results, that the discrimination in the labor market against the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population in 2004-05 was as high as 70%. That means the gap in access to employment, 70% is because of the discrimination against the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population. But happily, this has gone down to 38% in 2018, 19, 19, 20. We just take the average. So this is certainly a good news. And this is because of reservation policy being somewhat more effective, and also some awareness coming up among the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population. As far as the Muslims are concerned, this is the aggregative figure. Rural, urban differences will come out, but the aggregative result for the Muslims, we find that the discrimination is 30%. It's pretty high in access to employment when you take rural, urban. But when you take urban, you find discrimination in its access is much higher, but we'll come to that. But it is Muslim, discrimination against Muslim is 32%. It has also gone down to 16%. So there is a decline in the labor market. I must clarify to the listeners that we are talking about discrimination in the labor market. We are not talking about discrimination in the society. We are not talking about religious discrimination, but we are talking about religion-based discrimination in the labor market. We are not talking about, access to social space. We are not talking about, let's say, love jihad and whatever other things are coming up. This is not part of our analysis. We simply looked at the access to employment, and we are looking at the earnings of the two sections. Now, if you take the gender dimension, you find the entire gap in the access to employment and also in the access to, in the earnings between women and men can be entirely attributed to discrimination. Now, this is something which is extremely important, that how is it that it is coming as 100%? What the mathematical model does is to find out whether the capabilities that we have been able to improve, which is years of education, experience, years of experience, and also the family background, education of the parents. These do not explain whether the woman would be in labor force or outside labor force. Because a large percentage of women, almost bordering to 50%, who have good education are sitting outside the labor force, and only 50% or 52% are in the labor force, which means access to employment or earning for the woman is not determined by her capabilities. Her capabilities are not getting translated into the labor market. Much of it remains outside labor market. Now, how do you explain that? Such a high discrimination. We must make it clear that it is not totally because of the mindset of the employer who looks at the face of the woman and says, sorry, I do not like that face. I would like to, exclude her. That is a factor, but that is not the sole factor. There are genuine concerns when the employer says that, well, my job requires traveling in the, vulnerable areas, late night jobs in the villages, in the slum areas. And I would think that I don't want to put my employee into a difficult situation. That could be a genuine factor. And for that, society is responsible. But the model considers that also to be part of discrimination. 3, a woman does not go to labor market because she thinks that my family responsibilities are there. And, my old parents of her or her husband need to be looked after. And it is not that, well, she is willing, quote unquote, to not to enter the labor force. That comes under the social circumstances. It doesn't happen with the men. It's the woman who decides to stay at home and take care. Similarly, many women with high level of qualification do not enter labor force because of the caste factors, because, social hierarchy. The women do not work in many under, the parents or the grandparents think that our bahu or daughter should not go to labor market. So our present model captures the entire, all the factors, individual discrimination by the employer genuinely being concerned about the circumstances and not employing, the woman herself deciding not to join labor force because of family responsibilities, and some of the social factors which make women withdraw from the labor force. All that gets captured and that becomes 100%. That is something which is certainly very, very serious. And I must say that in the general discussion about this report, in the 1 month that the report has been released, there has been a lot of focus on the gender discrimination. I would just take another 2-3 minutes to present the result separately for the rural and urban areas. The situation in the rural area, and I would like this issue to be discussed by the panelists and others who are here. We do find that in the rural areas, the discrimination against the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population is as high as 80%. But this has gone down to 52% in 2018-19. We are comparing 2004-5 situation with 2018-19. As far as discrimination for the Muslims are concerned, it is 30% in the rural areas, which has again gone down to around 10%. So This is for regular employment. We do find that the discrimination in the rural areas is much higher for the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population compared to the Muslims. Our report gives this explanation, but certainly there can be other interpretations and understanding of the data. What we find is that discrimination for the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population in the rural areas is higher because they are competing for the same jobs, similar jobs as the upper caste people. For example, domestic work, gardening, and the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population are working in those activities which require involvement, engagement, agricultural laborer. They have to sit and eat together. Whereas, as far as the Muslims are concerned, most of the labor force, large percentage of the labor force is in non-agricultural sector. That is maintenance, repair, leather industry. And there are some specificities of the activities where Muslims work with the low earning and not much of competition from others because they have some kind of specialization in those activities, and you do find others coming in. And also the incentive for coming to this sector is not very high because the earnings are not very high. So what we find in case of Muslims in the rural areas, their earnings are low, their capabilities are low, and we have not been able to include the capability creation for the Muslims from the family and peer group, because that we have no official data at the national level to find out how much the Muslim carpenter is able to get it from the household, from the parents. So that if we could have included, then capabilities would have been higher and the low income would have given, low earning would have given discrimination. But what we find is that in the rural areas, Muslims are in those activities that do not require entering the household or interacting with the household members. They do the job outside, and that is the reason why you find that the level of discrimination in the rural areas in access to employment and also in the earning is less compared to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population. Come to the urban areas. Despite reservation, for the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population, we do find that there is discrimination in the access to employment. And that is 23%. For the urban scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population, the discrimination is 23%. This has gone down to about 20%. But as far as the Muslims are concerned, this is as high as 60%, much higher than that of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population. I did mention it was in the range of 15 to 20% for the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population. But as far as the Muslims are concerned, it's about 60% in access to regular salaried employment, which has not gone down. It has gone up to 68%. And that is a matter of concern. But this is the high level of discrimination for the Muslims in the urban labor market, for them to get into regular employment. For casual employment, there is not much of a discrimination, either for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, or because that's a very low level of activity. But when we look at the earning discrimination for the Muslims in the urban areas, where I said the discrimination is very high in access to employment, has gone up from 60% to 68%. What we notice is that earning differentials are not there. Earning discrimination is not there for the Muslims, and very small earning differential for the scheduled caste, because once the job is being done, then you don't ask the carpenter, what is your religion or what is your caste? Because either they are coming through some agencies, and that's why you find earning differential, even in regular employment, is very little for the scheduled, because regular employment means some laws and regulations are there. So there is least discrimination in the earnings, both for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe and Muslim population in the urban areas. As I mentioned, that Many of them are employed by an agency. So there is a private contractor. He has some 20, 25 people. And when that contractor pays the same amount, but in getting the employment, even through a contractor, Muslim discrimination is pretty high compared to the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe discrimination, which is, as I said, is about 15 to 20%. But for Muslim population, it is very high. What about gender discrimination? As I mentioned here, in the urban areas, is again 90% to 100%. That means the women labor force are not women labor force who want to enter the labor market are not able to get commensurate employment because of social constraint, because of individual constraint, because of the prejudices of the employers. Finally, this is the labor market. There are two other sections. One is the factor market, which talks about the credit. And what we notice that the study, which was led by Professor Madheshwaran, it clearly shows that there is a high level of discrimination in access to credit for the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population, but this has declined over time. And also, this study shows that the commercial banks have a higher level of discrimination, and the level of discrimination more for scheduled tribe compared to scheduled caste by the commercial banks. It is 37% for scheduled caste population discrimination for providing credit. For scheduled tribe, it is 48%. As far as the cooperative banks are concerned, there is a lesser discrimination, 9% for scheduled caste and 29% for scheduled tribe. The final chapter is on discrimination in endowment. We have taken hospitalization facilities. There we show that discrimination is pretty high and remain more or less the same or slightly gone up. Access to hospitalization facilities in the government sector. And what is interesting is that your levels of earning, levels of education helps you in getting access. So if you are an educated person, you are likely to have connections and you can get hospital beds easily. And also if you are rich, you are in a position to, although government beds are highly subsidized, but more affordability becomes very important. Last point is, which is very interesting, the study shows that access to hospitalization facilities is higher for women compared to men. And that was certainly striking because we find gender discrimination in the labor market to be 100%, whereas when you go to hospitalization facilities, we find a larger percentage of women are, when they are ill, they get hospitalized compared to the non-scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population. The results can be easily interpreted. The hospitalization for women is partly because of the maternity related issues. So that has to be adjusted, that they are hospitalized because of the child birth, delivery. But more interestingly, what we notice is that the poorer sections are using the hospitalization facilities. There's a larger percentage in the bottom 20% who use hospitalization facilities for women. But as the income level goes up, there's parity. So it basically means the poorer households are utilizing the hospitalization facilities for the woman and not for the men. For the men, even among the poor, they would like to use the private facilities. But as the income levels are lower, you find women are only utilizing the hospitalization facilities in a large number. And we find that the states which are economically better off, there you find that women are using the private facilities as well, but the poorer states are depending on hospitalization facilities as far as the women are concerned. So basically what comes out is nothing very shining about the gender coverage, because women are using the hospitalization facilities in the government sector, but that is of a much lower standard than the average private sector facilities. And the moment your income levels goes up, you shift from public facilities to private facilities for the woman. I think I would like to conclude here the initial presentation. I'm sure there are a lot of questions or clarifications or comments.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for taking us through this entire journey. What I will do now is that before I take questions, with all your permissions, and I know I'm very delighted that all of you are able to join us today. And so please keep your questions ready. In fact, it might be better if you can put your questions on the chat window. But what I would like to do now is go over to Professor Abdul Shaban. Professor Shaban has seen this report in great detail. He has read it carefully. He is somebody who understands research methodology of this kind better than any of us, and is someone who will be able to translate it for us to give his own understanding of the report and why he thinks it is a significant step in the direction of providing a non-discriminatory work environment in India, especially post-COVID. So Professor Abdul Shaban, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Amir Ullah Khan. As usual, I say that Professor Amitabh Kundu, his style of talking really unravels the whole issue of inequality and discrimination in the labor market. So lucid way, so clear, so profound way, I say, so deeply explained. And I think I saw the report. I was so impressed that I saw the first report of this kind which has gone in such a detail. And Professor Amir Ullah Khan, you will agree with me that this is going to make much difference, not only the policy arena, but to a common man also. And as an academics, I'm talking about it, that it is going to influence us a lot, that what future holds for this report is immense. Having said that, let me come to point by point why the report is first very powerful and immense. The first, and why it is significant. The first thing that we know that overwhelming proportion of Indian workforce is in the informal sector. And this informal sector is a loose market where the people play the game which they like to play on the basis of communities, on the basis of caste, on the basis of religion, on the basis of gender. And this is really open, and as actually whatsoever the biases are embedded, are propagated by the media, comes into play in the labor market. And this labor market get affected by that, and really it gives a different churning to the labor market and actually creates a big issue for this. Second very important part of why it becomes significant, because for large masses in this country, the only way to really earn some and create some asset and wealth and income is the labor, because we have freezed the distribution of the assets and wealth long back. There is no possibility. Now the government is thinking, if the labor market enter into that, and particularly higher education, and then led by this, then we have the devastating consequence for the Indian poor, because they will not be able to move up. They will remain at the bottom of the pyramid, and they will continue to remain historically as a residue in the society, and they will continue to function like that. It is as such, given these two important points, which I want to say, these reports become immensely important. And it becomes important for the policymaker, for academics, and I said for the common man to understand what is churning out, going on, what is mutating in new way in Indian labor market. And that what actually we need to, I must commend that this report has unraveled these things. Now, something very important, especially very useful for the academics I am coming to, because I had to learn a lot from this. I mean, obviously, because there is a huge number of issues which actually for academics, how to really use the data, what way you differentiate between equality and actually discrimination. This reports very well unravels those things. And I'm sure that the students who are sitting here today, they are going to benefit, are those who are going to read that how to do this. On the methodological part, obviously, Professor Kundu has already pointed out that it was very important. I must say that a very important part of this report was that it used the secondary data. And why the secondary data? Because it is generated by the government and are actually some agencies. This data is available for everybody to really do the calculation to find out the similar results. Nobody can say that something is emerging from the biases of the researcher, which actually subjectivity often has been blamed in this kind of studies, that no, because there may be subjective bias of the authors or subjective bias of the organizations, they create that. And this, as such, the secondary data use gives the robustness to the, it is not limitation, sir, but it is actually robustness and actually replicability to the possibility that anybody can use, replicate, and see the result and find out the same thing. And that actually gives you more scientific vigor and power to the report. As such, though limitations are there, obviously, because data is at the national level, but that is where the academics like us and actually many of our students who can do the similar kind of thing through the primary data or local and micro level studies can come in. And that's where the contribution can come. So having said this, I have a few questions, and obviously you have very well explained. I was thinking that why this discrimination really prevails between the religious communities and SC/ST, particularly minority community, in rural and urban market. You have explained very well, but if you can throw some more light on that, that will be wonderful. Now, I just list my questions up. So the first question is that, second, that your research shows that Muslims are facing more biases in urban labor market. What is actually, I mean, reasons you have explained, what way we can overcome that? That is another question. And the last question I would like to put for you, sir, is that having from where I started, that what is the process you see that Indian society can adopt for equalization? I mean, equity, equalization, which I am using the larger term, given that this kind of thing that we are not distributing the even asset, we are not actually privatizing education also. Now the capability will be compromised. Second, then there is a discrimination. How do you see that possibility that in 4 or 5 decades, Indian labor force, particularly from the lower sections, can move to the higher section? Is there a possibility given this kind of situation? With this, I over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Amir Ullah Khan.
So
how do you want to conduct? Do you take the other questions also? And
yes.
If there are any.
Can you, I don't know if you can see them, but on the chat window, I have a question that is from Sajida Anju. Sajida, would you like to come in, or should I just read it out?
I think we ask the person to ask the question. That will be better.
Yeah. Sajida, can you come in? It's an important question. She's
Hello.
Yes, can you unmute? Yes, and you can also perhaps
Good afternoon,
video. Sajida?
Yes, sir.
Can you open your video also?
Sir.
Go ahead and ask the question.
Okay, so I just wanted one clarification that what are the tools and methods you have used for discrimination part for Muslims in urban areas, specifically for the access in employment? I was just just thinking
Yeah.
about how to calculate it, the methods.
Can I ask a small question, Sajida? What is your background in terms of statistical expertise? I mean, have you what is your discipline?
Economics, sir.
Okay, so certainly you are familiar with the regression. I can
Yes, sir.
explain
Yes,
that.
sir.
Fine,
Yes, sir.
no problem. I'll explain that, and I think it will be very important question for others also. You would exactly like to know, how do you really separate out the discrimination from the capabilities? Because the total gap is because of differences in the capabilities of two groups, and total gap is also partly because of the discrimination. So how do you really separate it out methodologically? I think that will be very important, which I will come back to.
Wonderful.
Khan?
So there's one more. Arun Teja, can you quickly ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me, Professor?
Yes, Arun. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
I was wondering if the results of discrimination for endowments and access to hospitalisation are being categorized for SC, ST, and Muslim or not. Because in your explanation, everything has been categorized, but you did not explain if they are categorized there or not.
Sorry, whether the categories are clear or not?
The results of discrimination in endowments and access to hospital, are they categorized for SC, ST, and Muslim?
Okay.
Yeah, it's just my curiosity.
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. That's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah. So can we look at that? And then we have Kaukab, who basically is volunteering, and thanks Kaukab for doing that for Kaikubal. Ali is saying that he is an ICSSR fellow at Aligarh Muslim University, and he wants to translate the report into Bengali. Certainly, Ali, that will be wonderful, and we will talk about that separately. Because the Bengali audience will be an important audience for us. So, sir, those are the questions. If you can take them, then I can have another quick round. Otherwise, we have already used up a lot of our time. So,
may I ask Professor Amir Ullah Khan to share some of his comments, which he had personally done with me, or would he like me to take up those issues? Because I know you have, with regard to the rural discrimination for the Muslims being less, you had talked about, the reorganization of the villages, that many minority population move from one village to another.
yes.
I was looking at a study done by Institute for Objective Studies for Muzaffarnagar, in that district, and Shamla district. And they do point out that there has been reorganization, that many minority population moved out of these villages where they were in very small number and went to the villages where they have a majority. And once that happens, the discrimination in the rural areas will go down. For example, in Kerala, the discrimination, and we know with personal experience, is very low, because the large percentage and the cultural ethos is certainly not in favor of discrimination. Would you like to say anything on this, Professor Amir Ullah Khan?
Hi, sir. I mean, you said it very well. My question to Professor Kundu, or my comment was that in the rural areas, what could have happened is that after the early riots in Muzaffarnagar and Saharanpur, and the movement of Muslims from one village to another, could very well hide discrimination, in the sense that what had happened, and we saw that in Saharanpur clearly, that the typical demography is that predominantly non-Muslim villages. There are very few Muslim-dominated villages. The villages which are predominantly non-Muslim have a smattering of Muslim households. Faced with discrimination and actually the fear of death, these few families did move away, and moved away to either uninhabited areas or unlivable areas outside the village, or to those villages which had a large or almost complete Muslim population, and therefore that might hide discrimination in the labor force. That was the point I had made, and Professor Kundu,
Thank you
for addressing that. Yeah.
Thank you for this. I think Professor Shaban has raised two very important questions. One is that the discrimination in the formal sector and the discrimination of informal sector, the whole processes will be very different. What we notice is that within the formal sector, once you are employed in the organized sector, the earning discrimination is very little. It's not possible because once you are in a formal sector, there's some kind of a regulations, norms which are guiding. But informal sector is something which is extremely important, wherein you do find that the self-employed and casual workers, they are the people who are getting, discriminated, and there the caste factors and the religion factors comes up very significantly. In self-employment, for example, many Muslims would hide their identity by getting some kind of a, neutral name and try to, sell something in the food or in bangles, that is what is happening. And that's why the discrimination for the Muslims may come down a little bit, but yet the discrimination works out to be very high, basically because even the agencies which are employing them are discriminating on the basis of caste and religion. Just give me a second, huh? There's somebody at the door. I'm sorry. Yes. The other point that Professor Shaban mentioned about rural and urban areas, and he had shared with me earlier that there is discrimination against the Muslims in the rural areas also. But I have a feeling that since they're outside agriculture and the nature of activities do not involve the workers to enter the households or work with them on a day-to-day basis. It's just some kind of a service being provided from outside. That could be a reason why you find lesser discrimination for the Muslims, whereas for the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, they are competing with the higher caste people for getting the job of domestic help. So obviously, when you're engaging somebody as a domestic help, Muslims are not there in the labor market at all, perhaps, or very little. But scheduled castes are there, and then you find they are being discriminated. So that could be the explanation, but I'm quite sure that this is not enough. We need to perhaps look into this in greater depth. The question about the methodology. I just tell you very simply, what we do, let's say we take the earnings of the Dalit workers. By the way, as far as Dalit and scheduled caste and scheduled tribe are concerned, we have not been able to separate out. We have not been able to give separate estimate for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe because the sample size will become very small. Whenever we are giving a result, we have to see to it that the estimates are statistically significant. And that's the reason when we have different subcategories of workers, we did not find enough sample size. If Khalid had joined, he could have explained that. And we have really avoided making any generalization when the statistical results are not robust. But how did we really bifurcate, make two parts out of the total gap? I said 400 for non-Dalits, 200 for Dalits, gap is 200. What we do is to find out in a regression, we take Y, that is the dependent variable, as the earnings of all the Dalits. And we run a regression with X1, X2, X3. X1, X2, X3 are explanatory factors. One is education. Second is experience, however we capture it. And third is the education of the family, because family background also helps. And we find out that the beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, these are the three coefficients of X1, X2, X3. What do they show? The coefficient beta 1 is associated with, let's say, earning, levels of earning. Beta 1 tells that how the levels of earning will be transformed into income for the scheduled caste population, for the Dalit population, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population together. Beta 2 is the coefficient for experience. Beta 2 tells how the level of experience if it increases by 1, how that will get translated. So beta 1, beta 2, beta 3 are really the coefficients which transform your capabilities into income. Now, similarly, we can calculate for non-Dalits. We calculate beta 1 star, beta 2 star, beta 3 star. What are these? These are the coefficients for the non-Dalit population. That means that how their capabilities are being translated, and we find beta 1 star is higher than beta 1 because the labor market is favoring the non-Dalits. So beta 1 star, which is giving the yield of your years of education, is higher. Beta 1 star is higher than beta 1 because beta 1 star is for the non-Dalit, how their capabilities are being transformed into the earnings. So beta 2 star is higher than beta 2. Beta 2 is for the scheduled caste, and similarly beta 3 star is higher than beta 3. Now what we do, we take the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population. Instead of giving beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, we give them beta 1 star, beta 2 star, beta 3 star. Assume as if they are being treated by labor market in the same way as the non-Dalits. So we keep their capabilities and we replace it by beta 1, beta 2, beta 3. So what happens? Earlier it was coming to 200. Now the moment you put beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, that means the coefficients which are applicable for the non-Dalits, now we apply, assume that labor market is not discriminating, then what will be their earning? We find it will be 250. You know, the earning would have been, how much would be the earning? We find that this will be something like 350, which means beta 1, beta 2, beta 3 is less than beta 1 star, beta 2 star, beta 3 star. And if you replace by these new coefficients, they should have really got 350 if the labor market is not discriminating. So 200 to 350, 150 is because of the discrimination. And 50, which is remaining, is the capability factor. So basically we replace the coefficient. This is Okaka blinder model. This is a standard model which has been used in India, outside India, by a large number of scholars. We have just used the same standard methodology to separate out the contribution of endowments from the contribution of the social identities. I hope the methodology is clear, or is there any clarification on that, on the methodology?
Thanks, sir. That is very clear. That is absolutely
Okay.
clear. Yeah.
Sir,
Any
this
other
was
question?
for sir,
Sajida?
yes,
Yes,
sir. Sir, this was clarification for the wage earning differentiation, like
Yes.
differences from the Oaxaca blinder decomposition.
Mhm.
I was just curious to know what is the discrimination on the basis of excess of employment.
Mhm. Right. I mean, I think you have really raised a valid clarification. As far as the earning is concerned, we have the number Y1 and Y2 for the Dalits and non-Dalits, for the Muslims and the, when we take Dalits and non-Dalits, we take in non-Dalits, exclude Muslims also, because, you know, otherwise we compare Muslims with non-Muslims, excluding scheduled caste, scheduled tribe. Scheduled caste, scheduled tribe being compared with the non-scheduled caste, excluding Muslims. Now, as we take Y1 as the earning of the Dalits and Y2 for non-Dalits and run two sets of regression, we similarly run two sets of regression with the probability of getting a job, right? So if the person is employed, it is 1. If the Y is 1, if the person is not employed, it is 0. So it's a logistic model whereby we try to find out the contribution of X1, X2, X3, 3 endowment variables, years of learning, years of experience and family background, to find out what is the contribution in getting a job. The probability of employment itself can be really used as the dependent variable, 1 and 0, and calculate how the differences are coming up. Sajda, is that all right?
Yes, sir. Thank you
go to
so
the
much.
logistic model, you'll find earning being replaced by a binary 1010, depending whether if you are employed, then, and if you are regular employed, then you give 1. So you can just find out the model.
Yes, sir. I got it.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir.
We are coming to an end of our 1 hour slot. So I hope that you've all, have had your queries addressed. In any case, the idea in this was to get a crisp presentation in and recorded. This will be saved and archived and sent to all of you for purposes of disseminating to a larger audience, which is what we will do, which is the reason for this. We will be back with this very soon, certainly in December, with the Urdu and the Hindi version of the reports. And as we just discussed with Ali, we should also go in for a Telugu and a Bengali version soon, because this is something that not only is important for, as Shaban said, for policymakers, it's also important for everybody to understand what's happening in the country right now, because the issue of the workforce and discrimination there is very serious. We have discussed earlier issues of discrimination and deprivation in the education sector, in the housing sector, in the health sector, but it is not. But this kind of insight into seeing discrimination in the workforce is indeed seminal, and I'm sure that it will result in several more works on this subject, because this is something that will define our post-COVID recovery and the nature of development that India will see over time. There are questions, sir, that we will take at a later stage, in terms of solutions, and Aparna is asking a good question on how do we overcome this gender discrimination. It's such a pernicious and permanent problem we have, and it precedes COVID considerably. So how do we do that? And that's an area, Aparna, that we need to work on, and we will. But for now,
can I add one thing?
Yes, please.
I thought you have really, and you and Aparna have really flagged a very important issue. And I must say, the report per se, the analysis is somewhat weak in putting forward strong recommendations. We have simply said this is the structure of the inequality and disparity and discrimination and how it has changed over time. But Oxfam's team worked quite hard, and because they have to do advocacy, so they did give a list of the things which needs to be done, and certainly social engineering emerges as a major area of activity. Discrimination against women, it is 100%. That's largely because of the societal factors. Because societal factors are resulting in their exclusion from the labor market. Similarly, I always thought that WhatsApp, industry, which spreads in a way to some extent communal virus, I thought this is only for jokes, but no, it does affect the labor market also. In our study, we have looked at the situation before COVID and after COVID. We do find, during COVID period, the first quarter, we do find that the impact of the COVID is very different for the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe population compared to the others. And the impact is much more severe for both Muslims and scheduled caste population during COVID. So certainly social engineering is extremely important, and that's where we have to do, but a lot of policy reforms are also required. Some directed, subsidies or directed benefits given to, say, sections which are excluded would be very important. Professor Amir, I think you may take up. I just thought I will add this to support the point that you're making.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Aparna and others, in some sense, we had discussed this issue in the famous Kundu committee report, where we did a post-structure evaluation. And in that, we had suggested that one of the ways in which we can look at solving the discrimination issue, be it gender, be it any minority, is to look at some comprehensive diversity indices or a discrimination index that can then be used to incentivize incentivize a diversity in the workforce, both in the private sector and the public sector. It has been put to good use in several other countries, and Professor Kundu and Professor Abu Saleh Sharif had recommended it very strongly. It will be, given the nature of the problem now, it will be something that we should take up quickly, especially given the fact that the female workforce participation is just plunging. And it is at possibly its lowest ever in any country that I can think of. And if we don't work on it now, we will have a seriously lopsided workforce with no participation from 50% or 49% of the population that is indeed India's largest minority. It will reflect in all the gender indices that put India in a bad light right now, and will in fact impact investments too. So I think it's an important point. Professor Kundu has written about the diversity index otherwise also, where he has proposed it as a complete and a comprehensive solution. So I must thank all of you for having joined this absolutely fabulous discussion, which went from one horizon to the other, where we looked at the broad socio-political economic issues to very specific issues of the regressions used in calculating the level of discrimination. I don't think that it was. I wouldn't have thought it possible to have covered all these aspects in 60 minutes. But it is thanks to Professor Amitabh Kundu's enormous expertise in articulating what he says and how he says it, and in all of you to have listened to this with such attention. Thanks, Dr. Ruchika Singh, for joining us. Indeed, the low LFTR is a problem. All of you, thanks so much again, and we will look forward to hearing from you soon. Ali will get back to you on the Bengali issue. Thank you so much, Professor Kundu, and Professor Abdul Shaban. I think you can now
Thank you.
have your breakfast.
Thank you. I could see many of them, Ruchika and others sitting here.
Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, sir.
It's really to see you. Yeah.
Wonderful. So good seeing all of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you. It's
Thank you.
really
Thank you, sir.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.